Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Franchise Unfiltered podcast. Today, I'm joined by Larry Oglesby. Larry is a franchisee, and I'm going to let him tell us what franchise brands he's involved with. But Larry, I got fortunate enough to be introduced to you, and we had a amazing conversation a couple weeks ago. So I'm really excited to have you here on the podcast to share a little bit of your story.
Thanks, Wes. Yeah, same here, man. I'm really excited to share it with your audience. I've just been in franchising for 18 months or so now. We started with both are with Belfor, by the way. Redbox Plus Dumpsters is the one we first started with 18 months ago. About 6 months ago, we started with Cool Bins. I'm actually in one of our mobile offices today.
Cool.
So So it's just been 18 months in franchising, but we've owned our own businesses for about a decade. But before that, as you well know, I was definitely a corporate guy for 30 years.
Yeah. So you're what some may refer to as a corporate refugee.
Correct. That's fair. That's fair. I tell my wife, I'm not sure I'm a great employee anymore.
Yeah, I think once you cross that line, it's hard to go back. I know personally, I think I'm ruined forever. And if anyone ever did hire me, they would probably get rid of me pretty quickly at this point.
Amen. Absolutely.
So Redbox Plus is roll-off dumpsters. Tell us a little bit more about Cool Bins, because I know it's one of the newer brands under the Belfor umbrella.
It is. Actually, we're the first franchisee. Cool Bins is a portable storage business. We have insulated, climate-controlled storage, mobile offices, even things like concession stands, refrigerator, freezers. If you think about, I would love to have an extra room in my house, sit in my driveway. That's a perfect use for a Cool Bins. It plugs into a 120 volt out. A normal 120 volt socket, 20 amp, right? And it keeps everything perfectly temperature controlled at whatever temperature you would like it to be at. So, please.
Maybe this is what I need for the podcast studio. I've kind of been dreaming of putting together at some point.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's this very easy to convert to something like that. I'd probably put a couple of sound panels in it.
Yeah, you soundproof it a little bit to make sure there's not an echo. But so, like, what are you're relatively new into the business, but what are some of the most common uses that you're seeing people use these for?
Yeah, so a lot of our customers are renovation companies. So you get another Belfor brand, 1-800 water damage.
Yeah.
They might have a response in the middle of the night. They need to take the goods that haven't been damaged out, store them in a place that won't be damaged, so that they can then go in and do the demo work and the repair work to be able to make it like nothing happened, right? So that's the larger. So other times are other renovation companies are they might just refurbishing a kitchen or a bathroom, or you just get a homeowner looking for spring cleanout. They've got a garage that they can't park a car in anymore, and so sometimes they ask for both services.
Yeah.
They need a dumpster to throw things away, and they need the Cool Bins to be able to sort out what they can keep, or and then be able to move it around, put it in a better organized manner.
I could use that setup myself right now. I just told my wife the other day we probably needed to have a junk removal company come and help us haul away some stuff. And yeah, it'd be easy if we could take all the things out we're not getting rid of, put them in one place together. Hell, I might get one to put my kids in from time to time. Just to
that's the best.
Maybe I would just go hide in it, one or the other. Well, it's interesting though, because they're very complementary, obviously, right? So Cool Bins is more on the storage side, whereas roll-off dumpsters, that's pretty self-explanatory. Are you seeing yet that the two do have synergy? Meaning, you're working with the same clients on the same jobs.
That's the reason I love it the most, right? Yeah. When we were not looking to expand this fast. And
Yeah.
some people from Belfor came up and said, "Hey, would you be interested in taking a look?" And there were a few reasons why I pulled the trigger on that. One was just that aspect of synergies. So the same people that drive the trucks for Redbox can drive and deliver for Cool Bins. The same laydown yard is the same, but more just as importantly, the back office is the same. So we use many of the same software packages. I talk to the same people at Belfor
Yeah.
for support for marketing or other items, and so it's a very seamless situation, right? Where I think we have holding companies just for our trucks, as an example. So as you know, right? The longer you're in franchise and the more you have, frankly, the easier it gets. I think
Yeah.
you're able to really grow dreams for other people as well as do right by your family. So
Yeah. Especially with, the synergies that you just described, and in particular, where like both of the brands you own have shared ownership, right? So back office similar, you're dealing with a lot of the same people. Like,
yeah,
my wife and I have owned two different franchise companies at the same time in the past, but they were completely different franchisors, no connection. And it's doable, right? You see
yeah,
people, build out portfolios of different types of
sure,
franchise businesses all the time. It doesn't have to be under shared ownership, but man, there's a lot of advantages to having it that way. And even thinking long term, right? You get down the road a few years, and maybe you have the opportunity to sell your business. Like
yeah,
that's a
that's
much
right.
easier transaction to pull off when if you're selling both businesses to the same buyer, it's all under the
Yeah.
same kind of franchisor umbrella.
Yeah, and listen, it's important that you trust the franchisor because it's one of the longest term relationships you're going to sign. You're signing a contract for 10 years. Not
Yeah.
many of us do that at any time in the
Yep.
past, right?
Yep.
So somebody like Belfor, who I can call up and they can have an honest discussion with me, and I can with them, and we can problem solving things mutually. Like that's essential, and for that reason, among others, when I look to the next brand to expand, it will 100% be, hey, what other Belfor brands are out there that we could put in the mix? Because I've just really loved being with Belfor,
Yeah.
working with them. I think there's a great group of folks.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a stellar reputation and a really cool portfolio of brands where
Mhm.
this is not, what they're doing is not uncommon in franchising. It's fairly common actually, where you have these, I always refer to them as parent companies. I'm sure there's a
Mhm.
more technical name for it, but and they either through acquisition or see an opportunity in the marketplace, launch a new brand. But usually if it's brands under the same parent company, they're going to have some synergy, right? Like our Shelf Genie franchise was acquired a few years ago by Neighborly, which is a
Mhm.
massive, parent company with 25 plus brands in the home
Mhm.
service, home improvement space.
Yes.
You see it in fitness, you see it in restaurants, you see it in
Mhm.
beauty. But Belfour's is unique because and this is just from the outside looking in, it seems to me like their portfolio of brands really have synergy, like where the
Oh,
businesses can feed each other. Whereas
yeah. They do.
like in Neighborly, yeah, we're all dealing with homeowners, and if they need
Mhm.
us for something, yeah, chances are they'll need HVAC at some point or plumbing or whatever. But it's easy for like the tops of these companies to sit around and say, oh yeah, well this we'll just
Yeah.
have our franchisees refer business back and forth to each other.
Yeah.
That's a no brainer, but it's a totally different thing to execute that at the local level, right, and get the buy-in of
Yeah.
all the franchisees across the board. But it seems like Belfour has figured that out maybe better than some of the others that I've seen. I
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, I think they have. Let me just give you a few examples of that, right? So, um, the Belfor property restoration business that they own, right,
Mhm.
is a fantastic. Uh, uh, I guess we're a customer of theirs, and
Right.
that's fantastic. I think the other one, like 1-800 water damage, Blue Kangaroo Packouts. We also work with them. But
Yep.
it's not just about who you can have a customer with, it's who you can partner with. So for instance, with 1-800 water damage, we know the people that own that well, they know us well.
Yep.
We help each other out, not just in customer provider aspects, but also in co-branding. And so we'll send out Facebook ads, right? Hey, out here working today with 1-800 water damage. These guys are great. Those type things help.
Yeah.
On the other side, we're all we're all business owners who come from different backgrounds. So sometimes there's times where you just need a thought partner, generally in business, that understands your knows. Well, I can call Chad and the guys up at 1-800 water damage, and we can have that discussion. And that's something that I hadn't anticipated. I hadn't anticipated that at all.
I think that's one of the biggest things that people overlook in terms of the value that you can get from being part of a good franchise system is just the peer group, right? In most cases, it's the other franchisees within the same brand, right? Because, in most of these franchises, it's all kind of a protected territory model. So no one's competing with each other. Right. Cool. And so people are willing to share, and you've got this peer group of other people that are in the exact same business as you are. They have the same challenges that you are. Someone may be further along than you, so they can kind of be a mentor. And then, you can pay that forward to franchisees that are newer in the business than you are. You guys have that on multiple levels because of what you just described with, the other Belfor brands in your area. But I think one of the things that does make it different than a lot of these other parent companies I see out there in their portfolio of brands is that within Belfor, at least some of the brands, you do have the potential to be the customer of some of the other brands, right? Like with Redbox Plus, I imagine there are other Belfor brands that have a need for dumpster services from time to time, right? So they will actually pay you, whereas like none of the other neighborly brands have a need us to come to our custom shelving or custom closets. And, like there is opportunity for referral partnerships and things like that, but not as direct of a synergy, I guess.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And what you talked about on the mentorship within brand, where that really matters to people in franchises in that first year to 2 years in business, because most people are not getting, like, for instance, I walked through several concepts with someone else, and before I decided on partnering with Belfor, and a lot of them they were guiding me towards a consulting thing, and what I says, I don't want to do a consulting franchise. I can do that on my own. I know the industry, I know the process, I know how to do that. No worries. I want to do something different. And I had nothing but a slight dream in the past. Actually, a practical joke that tied me to the dumpster business from before. So my wife and I are celebrating my 40th anniversary, Wes.
Congratulations.
And thank you. We started dating in 10th grade. So like 9th to 10th grade, we were on this field trip. And she said, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, just to pull on her leg to see how long I could pull this along, I said, I'd like to be a trash man. And then I described starting from the bottom up and how I would build the trash business over time and become, a super trash man, basically. And so I guess this is God's way of playing a practical joke on me now. We're 40 years in, and that's what we've manifested.
That's a hilarious story. And you told me that offline. So it was totally a joke. You didn't actually have any ambition of being a trash man.
No, none
yeah.
in the least.
Yeah, I think that's proof that God just has a good sense of humor. And he's like, you said this, 40 some years ago. So here we are. But seems like it's working out pretty well for you. And you're really just getting started. We'll get right back to the episode in just a minute, but if you've been considering business ownership, if you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you. answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode. So a lot more I want to talk about in terms of, what you're doing now as a franchisee, kind of how you've gotten to the point that you're at, how you have things structured. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about your background, if you're all right with that. So you mentioned you had been a business owner prior to getting into franchising, but take us back to your corporate days. What type of career did you have in corporate America?
So I would say there's two careers, right? One is an operations person, and that I was in Navy nuclear power and submarines, and then I was in a couple of really world-class operational programs as kind of a manufacturing design engineer, supervisor, ops manager, engineering manager, those type roles.
Okay.
And then I got a call, and I joined a consulting company. It's one of the best in the world, and then I became a partner in a consulting company. It's one of the biggest in the world. And at the highest position, I ended up running a business that was a North America business with about 35 partners, close to 300 consultants. We did 150 million or so a year in consulting revenue, and I did that during acquisition integration into this large company. So, if really advising senior level leaders in some of the biggest companies that we know about, including architecting their business systems or talking about things like digital or other types of changes happening in the environment. So, I think I woke up at one point and realized that I was in a different city each night, and I'd wake up in a hotel room and not remember which city that was. And we've always had a beat. I did my MBA from Carnegie Mellon, and I remember distinctly a stat from that. They said over 45% of Carnegie Mellon MBA grads end up owning their own business. And my brothers, two of my brothers, both own their own business.
Okay.
And I hadn't done that. And I really just wanted to see, you always want to know how much of your ability to do things is connected to the system, the company, et cetera, you're in, and how much is you. Right? So unanswered life question.
So it sounds like it was really, you clearly very successful in the different roles that you had and kind of on the corporate side. So you wanted to challenge yourself. You wanted to test yourself, see if you could go out and build something for yourself. And it sounds like maybe a lifestyle component too, maybe not as much traveling, a little more control of your time, your schedule.
Yeah, I think it's all of the above, right? What did they say? An entrepreneur will work 80 hours to avoid working 40 for somebody else, right? It's a little bit like that, right? You're, as you know, in these things, when you start them up, you're all in, and that's almost every waking moment. And your work, as my general manager says, he's like, I work so hard today so that I have the option of not having to work so hard tomorrow. And I was like, fair enough, right? And I think there's truth to that. And so it's
I think it's
all the above.
For me, at least, too. It's when you're putting in the hard work and the time and the hours for something that's yours, though. For me, at least, it's always felt different, right? It's been more enjoyable. Don't get me wrong. There's always going to be tough times and things you do that you wish you didn't have to do when you own a business. But for me, at least, it's felt very differently than like in the past when I worked for other people and I was, working really, really hard and putting in a lot of hours. It's a little bit different, and it's been far more enjoyable for the most part.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's, in a corporate environment, you get an opportunity to coach people, but you know what? You're coaching people who are in the same risk profile you are. And here, you're genuinely asking people to get into a riskier boat with you. And so the fact that they're willing to do that, right? It just makes you want to make them that much more successful. And
Yeah.
that sense of what will you do for yourself, but what will you do for others?
Yeah.
Is that question is asked daily, I think, in the
It's
franchise.
more responsibility, right? When you're the owner,
Sure.
right? You have other people essentially putting their livelihood in your hands, at least to some extent. And that's been one of the most rewarding things for my wife and I. And I won't sit here and claim that like we came into business ownership anticipating this, or that it was like one of our big motivators, because it wasn't. We were, looking to create a better lifestyle for ourselves. But being able to create opportunities for people that are willing to work hard and do good work to make a good living has been awesome for us. And like, we've had numerous examples of this, but we have a guy in one of our businesses. He's been with us for 6 years now. One of our just most consistent, reliable people. And I think it was a couple of years ago around Christmas, and his wife helps out with us a little bit too. And he sent my wife a text, or she sent my wife a text and said, "Hey, we just want to, really thank you guys for the opportunity. This is the first year in, really forever that we haven't had to put Christmas on a credit card."
Wow.
And it was just like, damn,
That's great.
that was cool. So it is more responsibility, but it, I think, can be a very rewarding aspect of this.
Absolutely, King. You bet.
So after you decided, hey, let me go see what I can do on my own, what were you doing before you started looking at franchising?
Yeah. So one, I left the corporate world and did independent consulting, and so I did that. And as you talked about lifestyle, it was effectively a early retirement where I played around a little bit, didn't really worry about growing it, didn't worry about how much revenue came in or anything else. It was a lifestyle switch.
Yeah.
At some point, the itch wasn't scratched, and I decided to expand with some other people, and so we went from my wife and I to 42 people within the course of less than a year.
Wow.
5 different businesses. Unfortunately, COVID really hit them hard, to the tune of me losing 7 figures during that time period. That focuses you a little more.
Yeah.
But I really, so I've always wanted for like 15 years, I've wanted to not only be in business for myself, but to be in business for myself locally. And so I've got great friends around the globe. What I didn't have was fantastic friends around the block. And when you start to thinking about the later days that you have, they're probably going to be spent around the block more than around the globe.
Good point.
And so as we continued to want to scratch that itch of, okay, let's grow businesses, I need that mental stimulation, I need to be in that game. I wanted to do it locally. But after the other experiences, and frankly, if I look in the rearview mirror, that without COVID, would those continue to flourish? Possibly. I don't know that answer, but I do know this answer. I felt the give and take of I was going to give up a little bit of upside to be in the franchise, but the exchange was I was really going to clip a lot of the downside risk.
Yeah.
As you know, Russ, there's 1,000 decisions to make when you're starting a business,
Yeah.
and you probably have the expertise to make 15 to 20 of them right, and the rest you're learning on the job.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to learn on the job of everything, because I do a lot of things well. Here's what I don't do well. I'm not a good marketing person. I'm no good at graphic design, right? I don't care enough to sit down and do the analytics and the finance stuff.
Yeah.
That's so, and some of that I've got a team. My wife is the best person I know for everything that's detail oriented. You know who is the best I know? at graphic design or marketing stuff, somebody who sits in Belfor, and I get to pull on them every chance I get
Yep.
to be a thought partner about either tactically how to do something or even philosophically what direction to head in and what are trade-offs. It's really hard to put a figure in a model on what that type of thought partnering is worth, but it's absolutely worth something.
Yeah, well said. I think I like how you described it. Yeah, maybe you give up a little upside, by going the franchise route, but you definitely decrease that learning curve a little bit. I've kind of come to think of it as like it just gives you the ability to run faster. I mean, look at you. You're not even 2 years in. You've got your second brand already.
Right.
We don't have to get into specific numbers, but just from the little bit you shared with me, like you're doing very well. I mean, my wife and I had 2 7-figure franchise businesses within a 3-year period from the first time, we bought our first one. And
hope to be there with you.
yeah. I mean, well, and it sounds like you're well on your way.
Yeah, we are. We are on one. The other one's still as we expected it to be. We're not there yet.
Yeah. Well, 6 months into it, there's really no way to expect to be at that point yet. Like with my wife and I have no doubt that we would have been successful if we had said, hey, we're just going to figure something out, start it from scratch, learn it as we go, build it. But I know we wouldn't have been that far along. So that doesn't mean it's the right route for everyone, but I think there definitely are pros and cons. There are some trade-offs, but what's really interesting to me with kind of what you're doing is, it seems to me, and you kind of alluded to this with, it was important to you to get into a business that you could really develop locally, right? And I think this maybe opens up the conversation a little bit to different types of expansion strategies that you see with franchising. You are, starting to layer on complementary businesses that focus on the same market that your first business was in. Whereas other people you may see, like they just go wider with one brand, and that strategy can work too. But, when you talk about upside, like, now you're part of this world-class franchise organization in Belfor, right? They'll all likely keep acquiring new businesses or developing new businesses. They've got all these other brands out there that, could at some point be an option for you. So, really sky is the limit from where I'm sitting, in terms of like how big you can take this thing if you decide that's what you want to do.
Yeah. And Wes, there's, as you know, you learn more about the franchise world in general, plus your specific brands as you get into this. And I think about like locally, I would love to expand more with Belfor as we talked about and do that locally. But there's another element of the business that we're a part of. If I think about resales within the same environment, resales are a fantastic way to get into the franchising world, right? You're getting something that may not be running as good as it should be at all, but you're typically getting that at a lower asset price. And it's a business that's already running, so you're not coming in and building it from ground zero. And my sense is if I ran the models really rigorously, I'd find out that has a better ROI than even starting up new. And so, if I thought about outside of the local area, I would certainly be open to doing resales of the same franchise in other areas. That'd be one expansion strategy.
Especially since you already know how to run it, you already understand the business. That makes it a little bit easier to, take it over and run it effectively from afar. Let me ask you this, because this comes up, I would say, a lot of times in the resale conversation. Some people might worry, well, hey, if this franchise is not doing well in that area, why would I want to buy it? Maybe it's just not a good area for that business. Like, what's your take on the resales that you've seen, right? Like, is it more operator or is it more market?
It's a good question. I don't know that I've got enough real data to tell you. I can tell you what my
what's your
thoughts are,
hunch?
right? my thoughts are let me take Redbox. When
Yeah.
we looked at Redbox, right, there were plenty of people starting that with one truck, 30 dumpsters. When I looked at it from the outside, when I think about the reliability of any new piece of heavy equipment, like their low volume, heavy manufactured goods, they break down a lot early stages, and then they tend to run for a long time. So that told me early stage, I need to have at least two. And so the market entry requirement, like when I do a strategy for market entry, I'd always say, okay, what's the minimum volume needed to be a player in this space?
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, I felt it was higher than what was being advised by the brand. I've never regretted starting higher, and that's probably key to why we're bigger. When you start too low on any franchise, then it's hard to overcome the necessary SG&A and fixed cost to where you
Yeah.
get to where it's throwing off cash.
Yeah.
So if I could go in and I could look and I could say, if I if I bought what's here at a discount and then I added to get to a different configuration, and I understood what the 3 or 4 things that I would change,
Yeah.
then I
What's
think
all?
I can make
Yeah.
it. I think I can make it, right? That's a lot easier bet to place than say even going into something brand new again. But
Sure.
the downside to that is it takes away your geographic selection,
Yeah.
and so you got to balance what's right for you and your family and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. It's another one of these things, pros and cons, right? There's no right or wrong answer in my experience from everything that I've seen. Um, I've seen people build amazing portfolios, if you want to call it that,
Mhm.
through all of these strategies and even beyond, some of what
Yeah.
we've even touched on to this
So,
point.
so I could tell you, I frequently talk to potential new franchisees, and
Uh-huh.
I'm talking to one, and I won't disclose the franchise or the person, but it was inspiring for me because I always ask, why are you doing this? And he said, well, I would like to buy this for my daughter. And I was like, I would like to be adopted because he was going to write $1 million check for his daughter, right?
Yeah.
I said, tell me how you got here. And he says, well, I started as a franchise owner 15 years ago. And he
Ah,
says, now I'm the largest owner in North America of this particular franchise. He said, I have 150 stores and 20 more are being built right now.
yeah.
And I remember talking to my GM the next week, and I said, what do you think the revenue is on the store? And he says, I said, all right, well, let's just say that there's 150 of them, and all he takes aside is $5,000 a week or $5,000 a month. How much money does this guy bring home in a given year? And
Yeah.
at some stage, you're overseeing and you're not running.
Oh, you
So,
have to get that big. Yeah, yeah, there's no
right,
way you could do it all yourself. You have to really, I mean, at that point, you're structured just like any big corporation is
that's
structured,
right,
right? When it
correct.
comes to layers of management and you're
Yep,
you're far more familiar with,
that's right.
operations of big companies than I am.
Mhm.
It's, I mean, I've seen examples of franchise. I used to get this magazine. It was like multi-unit franchisee or something, and a lot of who they would profile were people in the restaurant side of franchising. But
Yeah.
there are restaurant franchisees, and not
Mhm.
just restaurant, but it's very
Sure.
common in restaurants where they literally have $1 billion plus top line revenue across
Correct.
their holdings of different franchise businesses.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
wild, so
Yeah.
it's I think just based on the conversations I'm having on a regular basis with people that are maybe just a little bit curious about franchising, it's not something
Mhm.
they've spent much time looking into. There's two
Yeah.
misconceptions I run into all the time. This is
Mhm.
part of why I love these types of
Yeah.
conversations so much. One is that you need millions of dollars in capital
Right.
to get
Correct.
into franchise. And you do for some,
Yeah.
but there's plenty
Mhm.
out there where you don't need that much
Yeah.
capital. And then I think some people have this kind of misconception that, oh, if you own a franchise, you're not really a business owner and there's
Yeah.
not the potential to really go and like build a business or something where you can really create like wealth for yourself and life changing, type of money and, even lifestyle. So, it's so much fun for me to, hear from people like you that are proving those misconceptions wrong. And then there's no shortage of stories that you can see, or examples that you can see of people that have just absolutely built empires for themselves through franchise.
100%. Yeah, it's a friend of mine does quite well, and we were talking about, we each go on an annual golf trip, and he said, yeah, he says the two wealthiest people that are on my normal golf trip are both franchise owners of, and he names them off and talks about it. He's like, they're doing incredibly well. So I think that first part is true. And the millions of dollars, I would put it, or it's like, there's a budget level that's appropriate for everybody, whether you want to do a franchise business completely out of pocket, or get an SBA loan or whatever type of financing, or you go into private lenders. But to me, if you got the skill set and desire, and and you're open to doing whatever it takes to find the knowledge, and you're not afraid of work, I think there's no reason you can't get into franchise. And it's like I said, the first one doesn't have to be the last one, right? So it doesn't have to be your forever home.
I love that. I love that line. I remind people of that all the time. And I mean, I look back at when we got into Shelf Genie, and we were, we had essentially, it's not technically private lending, but we have a minority business partner that was a mentor of mine, right? Because we would have, probably been able to get the SBA loan back then, but it would have been, and Shelf Genie is not a big investment. I mean, we're talking 150K or less, to get this thing up and running, 2 territories. That's working capital too. Not a huge lift comparatively speaking to, a lot of franchises that are out there. But, I had this mentor of mine that had some experience in franchising, and, he put up most of the capital. It was important that, to him and to us, that we put in some of our own capital so that there was actual skin in the game. And then, we have an operating agreement, and that operating agreement has evolved over time as he's made his money back, and as we've hit different revenue goals. We're also tied to a minimum profit margin number. And so now he's very much a minority owner in the business. But, I think my wife was 26 and I was like 29, and we just had our first kid. So, we were able to figure it out. And I've seen plenty of other people younger than that, get into a franchise, and maybe it's a parent co-signing on the loan for them, or, someone that is willing to invest in them, or partner with them to do it. I mean, there's definitely ways you can kind of get creative and don't just have to go the SBA route or self-funded. I rarely see people self-fund an entire, and I've worked with some very high net worth people over the years to help get them into franchises. They're using as much as someone else's money as they can in most cases.
Well, particularly because when you get into it, right, you can read all the FDDs you want. I don't think there's anyone that gets into this thing 3 to 6 months in, and they haven't had a few black swans happen that like you never envisioned. And all of a sudden, you needed a couple $100,000 maybe to put in if you're in a heavy capital intensive business like we were in Redbox. I did so much analytic modeling that the guys at Belfor were laughing at me about it.
You might have been a little exhausting for them.
A lot, right? But
Larry's got another, he wants to run by us. It's important. Right? Something that you mentioned with the, at the time, the minimum requirements that Redbox had for, one truck and would you say 30 dumpsters?
Somewhere in that range.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. So based on your analysis, you're like, no, if I'm going to do this, I need to make sure I have the capital to start bigger than that. I'm curious on a couple things. Have they re-looked at that minimum requirement at all?
I don't know. Listen, there's plenty of people that are making a run and doing well with that. It's a matter of risk profile. So for me, it was, I need to be comfortable with 2 trucks, 'cause I wouldn't sleep at night if I had one. If one breaks down, what do you do?
Sure.
Particularly when you're differentiating based on your service level. And you know what? As soon as I had 2 trucks working well, I got uncomfortable having only 2, and so I've got a 3rd truck now. And I'm
How many
already thinking about when the 4. What's
do
that?
you have? Three. You have three right now.
Yeah, we're 18 months in. We've got 3 trucks. We're about to have 95 dumpsters, right? That's basically in both categories. That's 3 times what the recommended starting is, and we're 18 months in, right? Do I think that in another year, I'll tell a secret between you and me if you won't tell my wife, but we're going to have another 2 trucks and another 100 dumpsters in a year.
Let's go. Let's go. Hey, she's the one that fell in love with the trash man back in 10th grade.
That's
So
right.
how could she
Yeah.
possibly be upset with those
She
types of ambitions?
She can't. So yeah.
That's awesome. I love it.
But Wes, most of franchise businesses they do very well when you scale them.
Yes.
If you're going to aim, if your aspiration is at the FDD minimum, then there's definitely no way you're going to create the type of lifestyle and choices that you talked about earlier.
No, and you're going to burn yourself out too.
Right.
Most of the, below average franchisees that I've seen in the brands that we've owned and in other brands that I work with, they're not like losing money typically. They are just, like you said, they're kind of at the minimum or that, underperforming level. So the results that they're getting are not fantastic, and they're probably working harder to get
Correct.
those less than fantastic results than whatever they were doing before. Because to your point,
You're
these
dead on.
things really start to make sense once you get some scale, and scale is going to involve building out teams and delegating so that you as the owner are not physically, having to put your hands on everything. And so if you don't get to that point, your financial results are likely not going to be good, but you're probably working your tail off, and that's just a recipe for burnout. I've seen people go back to whatever they were doing after a few years of that.
And by the way, that's exactly why I think that resells are a bargain in the industry.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that you painted the picture of 75% of people struggling to make a go of it in franchise businesses, by the way, which is still that's a lower percentage than you would have if you were in non-franchise business.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. The same habits. Yeah.
I've seen just within Shelf Genie so many, at least 4 or 5 examples where you had a franchisee that had less than stellar results, decided to sell. And it's never made sense to me when someone would be like, yeah, I'm selling, but it's really this market is not great. Like people are different in this market. It's like, why would you point that out if you're trying to sell your business? That doesn't make sense. But I've seen the blame kind of be put on the market, and then you see a top performing strong operator franchisee come in and buy them out, and within 6 months that business is in that underperforming market is performing the way it should have been all along. So my personal experience is that vast majority of the time it's operator, not market. I'm sure there's some exceptions to that with maybe some businesses that are really seasonal and things like that, but
I think it's also tied into who the franchise owners are and what their franchise development process is, right? I mean, the reason I told you I love Belfor is because I trust them. I think we talked about this offline, but one of the areas growing up in nuclear power was Rickover defined integrity in that market, and it was not the measure wasn't do you tell lies, it's do you fail to completely disclose the truth. And so one of the franchise development directors at Belfor, I was driving with a friend, and he says, yeah, I love what you're doing in Redbox. And he's a perfect franchise candidate.
Yeah.
All the money, all the background, everything you would hope for in your dreams. And so he tells me, and he tells me where, and I said, well, I don't know that I'd do it there. Here's the reasons why. And I listed them out. I said, but tell you what, let me just call up my friend at Belfor. Let's see what he says.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called him up and I said, hey, so this is my friend. He'd like to be a franchisee. He's got all the money. I can personally vouch for him. Former Marine Corps officer.
It's a layup for the commission sales guy.
Complete layup, right?
Yeah.
I said, what do you think about, can you just coach him? And he goes, okay, well, let's talk. He gets to, so where would you like to do this at? And he tells him, he goes, oof. I don't know that I'd put my money at risk there. And here's why.
Yeah.
And it was the same 3 or 4 points that I had pointed out to him.
Yeah.
And I said, that's when I really trust someone, when they could have easily closed the deal, but it wouldn't have been the right thing to do, and they chose not to.
Yeah.
And that's what I expect, by the way, across Belfor's team. They are always incredibly straightforward on their opinions and what they feel is right, and it limits the amount of time you can't enter a conversation using one ear to listen to what people are telling you and one ear to try to figure out what they're trying to hide from you. And I never feel that way when I'm talking to a Belfor person.
Well put. Yeah. I mean, that's a culture thing, right? Because, it makes sense that at the top of the company, they're like, yeah, we don't want to be selling franchises in markets that we're not confident could support it, right? Because then you got to worry about closures and disclosing that. And it's the whole thing. It's, the leadership is playing the long game, right? So that's a fairly easy decision for someone in that position. But when you bring it a few rungs down the ladder and you have someone that is in all likelihood compensated based on the number of franchise territories he's selling, that's where you see, like, okay, this is a culture thing, right? Like that is
Western, this. I mean, he had no coach coming in or things like that, so it would have been an absolute top commission. If I don't know the commission structures, but I'm like,
he would have probably made
a waterfall, right? So
it would have been a like I said, that's a layup, right? So definitely a culture of integrity based on that, for sure. I'm curious what you don't have to like name the names if you don't want to, but you mentioned earlier you looked at a number of different franchises before deciding to move forward with Redbox. What was you said one was a coaching or consulting business. What was it about Redbox, other than your lifelong dream to be a trash man, that made you feel like it was the right one?
I will tell you, right, being able to land a comeback joke after 30 years, that's top tier, right? That's top tier.
Yeah, that might be reason alone to do it, even if the business just broke even.
Correct. No, so I actually had some natural skepticism on all. What I started liking was the tie-in to the construction group. I just like people that work in construction jobs. I like the way they think. It's a very practical, hands in the dirt, literally, environment. So I was happy about that. I was there was a time where I thought I'm not sure, and because there's patented, as Redbox has a patent on porta potties attached to to dumpsters, and that's
genius.
It's genius. But I wasn't aware in the market enough to know how valuable that was. But I called my brother up, who's been a lifelong civil engineer, and I said, "Hey, man, does this have any advantage or not?" He's like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he starts educating me. I'm like, "Okay." So I thought it's a differentiated. It was, the marketing and branding. Belfor does a really nice job on all of their products being clear and branded, and so I like those elements of it as well. And the fact that it was actually high capital was an attraction to me. I always feel like if it's too low on the rung, then there's zero barriers to entry. And so anybody can walk in and be a dominant player in that. And so that's a little riskier money. And so I prefer to go with something that's a little more capital intensive. And so that was kind of a little bit of thought process. Yeah.
What was your mindset on franchising before you started really seriously looking at it? Like, were you skeptical of the whole franchise thing? Had you ever even really thought about it? Because I see a lot of people that are like, I would never want to own a franchise. And then,
so by the way, I said I work with a franchise coach who's fantastic, and Mike was wonderful. But I remember the first 2 minutes of our conversation. He said, "What do you think about franchising?" And I said, "Nothing you could say on 60 Minutes." And I had known two friends who had got into food franchise, and that didn't go well. And I said, I just can't imagine like putting tons of money into something and then having to chase around 20-year-old kids to try to get them to come to work. I'm not interested at all. And fortunately, he was skilled enough to pivot that conversation a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's probably, I actually decided to give him 20 minutes. And it was probably the best decision I made to give him that 20 minutes. So at the end of it, it was an easy process to go through. The ability to say, as you know, there's such a wide range.
Yeah.
It's almost like, hey, let's talk about going shop for a house. Well, there's a hell of a lot of options, a lot of budgets and things like that you can go shop for.
Yeah.
The ability to listen well and to be able to put out enough different situations that you start get a feel and a pulse for what drives the person is key to people in your business, right? So he did a nice job on that. So it was good. I think we went through about 4 or 5 conversations before we finally locked in and said, Redbox was the right thing in Belfor. And I couldn't have spelled Belfor with all 6 letters back in the day. So,
that's great. Yeah, it's common in my experience, right? Is, and for you, was it, other than you knew some people that had gotten into food franchises and it didn't go great for them, was it just kind of that, or had you actually looked, like, how aware were you of like the full landscape of all the different types of franchises that were out there?
It hadn't even crossed my mind to ever do it. Right?
That's what I see most commonly. And I mean, look, I would very much put myself in the camp of, I mean, never say never, something could change. But as we sit here today, I'm in the camp of, I don't want to own a food business, franchise or not. I don't want to be in that business. But yeah, I find most people are not fully aware, just it hasn't crossed their mind how many businesses are franchises, and probably businesses that they are customers of on a regular basis that are franchises, and they're not even aware of it. So well, shout out to Mike for pivoting that conversation, getting you to agree to 20 minutes, and here we are now. That's a really cool story. So we'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode. Look, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but if you've got a few more minutes, I'd love to touch on something that you and I talked a little bit about in our last conversation, which is leadership, right? And you've already talked quite a bit today about scaling. You've talked about some of the goals that you have when it comes to, maybe continued expansion in your businesses. And as we've kind of established, like, you can't do that without, you as the business owner really becoming a leader, and then bringing in other people to play critical roles in the business, and you being able to delegate to them. You've referenced your general manager a few times. What is your, I guess, kind of approach been up to this point of building out this team, and, kind of getting yourself to this place where you can maneuver a little easier and focus more of your time on the big picture?
So Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, his son wrote a book called The Speed of Trust.
I read
And it's a decent book, right? But it's true. I think we all have an inherent decision that we have to make. Do you trust people or not? And what does that mean? And and so we've chosen to trust inherently. And it helps that I knew our general manager for more than a decade beforehand.
Okay,
So
that does help.
we,
Yeah,
we knew.
that helps as long as it works out, as long as it
Correct.
goes well.
Correct. That's exactly right. But we've known him, and this guy drives the heck out of the business, and he cares about people a lot. And he brought in someone that he knew, and that person started out as our primary driver. He's our operations manager now. He's doing great. We brought in other people, and they have a career path that's anchored out. But we're trying to view, like, the people. One, where are they going to end up 2 or 3 cranks of this dial? And how do we help them to reach those things they better themselves too? But we completely, there's pros and cons of being in small businesses, and you've got to offer both. But the cons is, wow, you got more risk than you are in a large business, right? Here's the pros. What matters is our customers. What is flexible is our ability to do things. So, like, 2 of our guys love jujitsu. I don't care if they take 2 hours and go to jujitsu 3 times a week, as long as our clients are served, right? And so I think leadership means that you trust people and you trust them to do right by the business and to understand the principles, right? To me, policies have to be written when principles aren't embedded. If you've got good principles, you don't have to layer in policy after policy after policy. Right? People should know when they were a child that stealing's wrong. And
Yeah.
whether that's stealing time or money or assets doesn't matter. But fundamental, you know the difference between right and wrong. You know how to place yourself into each other's shoes. I don't want people in our trucks that don't have rain gear for when it's rained, nor workman's comp insurance for if they get hurt, right? Similar, they need to be able to see and look and say, okay, I don't need to waste money because ultimately this comes out of Lisa and Larry's pocket, right? That's rational trade-off, but it's just being able to stand in each other's shoes and have rational discussions around, hey guys, here's where we're going. And I think the more you can be transparent about, here's the metrics in the business,
Yes.
here's what's going well, here's what's not, I think
Yep.
people inherently go there. I have heard from other franchisees, and they're like, well, how do you not have this happen or that's happen? I'm like, I've never even thought about having those issues. Like, hire the right people.
Yeah.
Right? Hire the right people and give them the ability to do what they need to do.
So when you say hire the right people, you're really meaning hire people that have similar principles and values to yours, not necessarily like hire the people with the right resume based on the job.
The resume based on the job is absolutely the last thing that I want to know, right? I want to know what type of person they are.
Yeah.
And I want to know how they'll treat our clients first, our business second. If they're going to do that, then you can train people to do everything we need in these businesses, right?
Totally. And it sounds like you've largely built your team through, your personal networks, right? Or
Oh yeah.
from people. I think that's
my
one of the
daughter's best friend. One of our daughter's best friend has joined our business and helps us on the administrative side. He's been
Yeah.
phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
So it has been a lot of personal connections. We've hired a couple of people that weren't personal connections, and we've been a little fortunate so far.
Yeah.
That's going to change.
I think it's a really smart approach. I know that it's worked for us in our businesses, and the hiring based on the resume has bitten us in the ass every single time that we've done it. It's so much more about getting someone with the right attitude, the right
Yes.
principles and values, as you said, and then teach them what they need to do. That's the easy part. You can't
Yeah.
teach principles, you can't teach values like most people. That's not going to change by the time they're at the age where you would be,
That
possibly
was
hiring them in your business.
that was their mom and daddy's job. It wasn't mine.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the role that your GM plays, and because one of the things you and I touched on when we talked last was because we had a business where we had a GM that was essentially responsible for running the day to day, and I wanted to make sure that he was incentivized to think like an owner.
Yeah,
And it sounds like that's
absolutely.
something you're really
Yeah,
big on your GM.
to me, somebody shouldn't be a GM unless they have a percentage of the business in their hands. And I can tell you that there are times when I'm doing consulting work that I have an ability to focus a little bit. But I can remember being on a call not too long ago with somebody's one of the software providers for that we use in the business, and he was asking me about my experience with their software. And I said, let me break it down for you. Haven't looked in your product in over 3 months. Like, Mark drives a business. I trust him to drive the business. Like, we talk informally, but he does. If you ask anybody in this community who's the owners of our franchise, 98% of the people are going to tell you that Mark is solar. I make mistakes sometime. I went and I said, I introduced myself as the owner, and I said, so what happened to Mark? And I'm like, nothing. I'm Mark's business
What you
partner.
do to Mark?
Yeah, yeah. Mark's
That's
absolutely,
awesome.
he's the face of our company.
Yeah.
And he drives it like that. And I value him like you would believe. He's fantastic. His family's fantastic.
Yeah, that's
Um,
incredible. That's what you want if you're trying to scale your businesses out the way you are, and you need someone in that critical position as someone that it goes much deeper than just a business relationship, and the trust is there, and they're treating your business like it's their business. You've incentivized them to do so because they essentially are being compensated like
well,
the
but Wes, it's not. I mean, it's a competition, but this when you, particularly that first franchise, um, Mark and I yelled at each other so much during those times because we all had to figure out what our standards were, how we were thinking about it, and just get to where you build a team, right? If I if we didn't like one another first and respect each other, I'm not sure you get through those times, right? So that's once again a reason to go back, and when you're selecting talent, it really does need to be based on the person's character more than anything else.
yeah.
And can you see yourself hanging out with them for 10, 20, 30 years? Well, I sure as hell hope that
Yeah.
Mark feels the same way I do, and that's the length of time we're together, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Super cool. Super cool. Well, Larry, man, I have so much more I'd love to talk to you about, but I don't want to keep you too much longer. In closing, what advice would you give to anyone out there that is, maybe at a kind of a similar point or crossroads that you found yourself at, and they're not sure about the whole franchise thing, or even like how to go about figuring out what the right business would be for them? What would you advise?
Yeah. First think about where you would like to spend your time after you're started, right? So there was a coffee business that I could tell you that the economic returns were phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I don't drink coffee. I don't want to be in. I don't want to be in there.
Yeah.
I don't drink coffee. I don't like coffee. Okay, that's a weird part. But you've got to love what you're going to do. And you got to love who you do it with. I think the second thing is do your analysis. So an FDD gives you one perspective, and it's a very fact-based perspective that someone's put a lot of time in it. But the person who wrote the FDD isn't the person writing the check.
Amen.
And so, for me, I took every fact they gave me, particularly the critical drivers, and I tried to triangulate that based upon what I could find externally. And I think the one thing I would definitely do is talk to, if they want you to talk to 3 people, ask them to talk to 6.
Yeah.
Get a wide range of discussions. These discussions cost you a half hour. They are worth their weight in gold, and it builds a network. If you decide to go that way,
Absolutely.
now you have a starting network that you have no problem picking up the phone and calling, and they don't mind you calling.
Gives you a good sense of what the culture's like within that brand too, right? Because kind of like, you didn't want to get into a coffee business because you don't drink coffee. Like, it's nice to feel like, okay, these other franchisees are people I can relate to and people I'd actually enjoy hanging out with and spending time in. Like, you can be successful in a franchise if the culture fits maybe not great for you, but sure as hell makes it easier when it is a really good culture fit and you can relate with the other franchise owners and they're like-minded to you and so forth. So no, that's really good advice. Amazing advice. We never said where your businesses are, so let's let the listeners know where you're actually operating your Redbox Plus and Cool Bins business, and that way, if anyone's in the area and needs your services, we can get them in touch with you.
Well, I appreciate it. We're in Athens, Georgia, home of the 2021 and 22 national champion Georgia Bulldogs.
There we go.
So love the area. We're just a little east of Atlanta. But a fantastic place to do business, a wonderful town. So.
Yeah, it is. It's a good area. It's no Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Go Tigers. I have to say that. My wife went to LSU. I have to say that.
I'm so sorry, Wes. I grew up a Georgia fan, and I went to Auburn, and both of those fan bases know that you're second fiddle. So
the last few years, that's been the case for sure.
I understand that as an Auburn guy completely.
Yeah. But Larry, man, thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And I know I've learned so much in the conversations that you and I have had, and I know the audience will as well. So anywhere like to point people if they wanted to connect with you, or if they are in the Athens, Georgia area, websites, anything like that?
They certainly look on our, they can Google us on Redbox of Greater Athens or Cool Bins of Greater Athens. Get in touch with us there. They can hit me up on Facebook. I will tell you I'm junior and my dad's senior. My LinkedIn page still doesn't, I still haven't gotten deep enough in this to put up franchise ownership on LinkedIn, but you can find me there. And that's where I do most of my consulting work through. So
very cool. Very cool. Well, Larry bought himself a nice mic to do this podcast. He's got his Cool Bins studio there. So maybe Larry will launch his own podcast soon, and we can continue to gain from some of his advice and knowledge. That would be cool.
Thanks, Wes. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, my pleasure, Larry. Thank you so much.
See you.